Welcome to episode 16 of the High School Golf Podcast. I'm Crystal Morse along with Ted Bishop, and today we are going to talk to coaches about how you can help your players with the mental game and emotional game of golf that they experience while playing high school golf. So, Ted, let's dig into it.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really good topic, and I feel like high school age kids have probably been exposed to less mental training than any group of athletes. Really looking forward to sharing some of the things that we feel like we've learned and some of the things that work.
Absolutely. And through this coaches training that we did through the NFHS a couple weeks ago, we shared some ideas and best practices in our last podcast. Hopefully you can do that training because part of it is on what we're about to talk about. And in that training, they talked about how to control your players' emotions and things that we can do. The biggest takeaway that I got from that is to help your players manage their emotions, you need to help them manage their expectations.
I would totally agree with that. And I think one of the sticking points for me in that training was a continual theme that said basically players are guilty of having their expectations exceed their competence. And I would think that, Crystal, in a sport like golf, that's true for just about everyone that plays the game. In my lifetime, the best score that I ever shot, I shot 65 twice. Not that I feel like 65 was the barometer of where I should continuously be playing, but I think there's a common tendency among all golfers, no matter how old they are, to, in their own mind, feel like their true ability is reflected on the best scores that they ever shoot. And I think as golf professionals, you and I know that that's not true. And when the USGA figures a handicap, they don't figure it off of the best scores that you shoot. So getting players to understand that their expectations need to match up with their competence level, I think, is very important.
I remember we were at the state finals with the first team that we had taken there a few years back, and I was with a player going down the 18th hole of Prairie View. His average for that season, I think, was 81 for the season. And if he parred number 18 at Prairie View, he was going to shoot like 81 or 82. Well, there was so much tension in him on that hole, thinking that he wasn't playing very good that day. I remember him being very frustrated about his playing that day. I felt like I needed to remind him that your scoring average is 81 for the season. And if you par this, which you're in a great spot to do, you're going to shoot 81. And just that reminder to him of this is your average. This is your season average. This is what you're going to shoot. Why are we frustrated here? And that's just an example of kind of what we deal with our high school players.
Yeah, I'm going to make a statement here that I feel like is about as basic as you can get, and it's applicable to any sport that you might play, in that lower expectations reduce tension. And I know, again, getting back to my own personal game, some of the best rounds of golf that I ever played, some of the best performances that I ever had in any sport that I played came on days where, for whatever reason, I really didn't have very high expectations. Didn't mean I was feeling negative. It just meant that I didn't really have very high expectations for what my performance was going to be that day. And when it was all over with, you could take a step back and you could look at it and you could say, wow, I really had a great day today. And I remember, one of the outstanding stories that I've ever heard in golf was one year Tiger Woods was at the Masters and he had a really rough range session prior to the round. And he's walking off the range to the putting green at Augusta National with his dad, and his dad is just shaking his head and he's just bemoaning about how bad Tiger hit the ball in that warm-up session. And Tiger looked at him and he said, "Pop," he said, "that's nothing more than a warm-up session. Warm up. That's all I was trying to do, is get my body warm. I'm fine. I'm ready to play." And he went out and he had a really good round that day. So managing your expectations is absolutely huge. And I think that sometimes players don't really have a technique problem. They have a tension problem. And that tension problem can certainly affect what your technique is going to be. We're going to try to kind of help people through some of this stuff. And I know, like, one of the taglines that you really liked from the certification we did was the advice to coaches to tell their players to train hard but play easy.
Yes, absolutely. And to go back just a minute, we had our parent player meeting last night, first day of the season, obviously snow here in Indiana, so we were inside. But one of the things that I reminded our parents of was to make sure and actually talk to your player and make sure that your expectations match, because there is nothing more detrimental to a player than their parents having super high expectations that again may not match their player's skill level, or it may not match their player's expectations. So for the parents to be able to manage that, actually talk to their player and make sure that they are on the same page. Maybe you want your player to play college golf, maybe you want them to be in the state finals. Maybe your player just wants to they could have totally different expectations for the season, and it's a really bad mix when those don't mesh.
Yeah, and I think just a couple other points while we're on parents that we haven't mentioned up to this point in time, but two things that coaches can really do to encourage parents to help them be a coach at home, so to speak, would be first of all, be the biggest supporter that your kid has. And we've said this as coaches, it's kind of our job to, relatively speaking, be the bad cops with players. And I really like the fact that we encourage our parents to do nothing but give their players positive reinforcement. The other thing that falls right into positive reinforcement is the minute the kid crosses the threshold, don't start replaying shot by shot, hole by hole, the round of golf with them. They need to decompress. If they've had a rough day, they understand that. And I'm not saying there's not a time that you can maybe try to dissect certain parts of the round if you're a parent to help your player know where they need to improve. But immediately after the competition or even a few hours, give them a break. Let them chill out. And I think what you'll find if you're a parent, my recommendation for you as coaches would be to try to sell your parents on this fact that if they take that approach, at the end of the day, their boys or girls are probably going to be far more apt to speak freely and be open with them as parents.
Yeah, I know as a player, I can remember specifically, even in college when I played and I'd have a bad round, and my parents were super encouraging, but even their encouragement annoyed me after a bad round, right? And I feel horrible about it now. And I mean, they were great. They handled it well, but I think reminding myself that as a parent, sometimes just saying nothing and letting your player decompress for however long they need to, and then easing into that conversation could be a good tactic. I think coaching can be a little different. Offering support from a coach can mean a lot to a player. But again, you got to know your players. Maybe they need some time to decompress too, just to kind of process it all. So, one of the things that I found super beneficial that we are going to do with our team is this handout that we got from that training, and getting the players to understand what it's like and how they act when they play bad golf and when they play good golf. And so the exercise that in the handout that we were given has this worksheet, and at the top it says I play my best golf win and I play my worst golf win. And it requires the players to analyze during their bad round, what are they doing? Do I have bad body language? Do I have negative self talk? Am I not focused? Am I not following my routine? And so it really gets them to analyze what they're doing during their bad rounds.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll start out with the bad golf happens when I do the following, and we'll just kind of rotate and go down the list. The first thing is when I overthink. And I think, again, classic examples on overthinking would be doing more than just getting the number and hitting the shot. We've coached a lot of really good players here. We had probably the best girl we ever coached. And I would say this if she was sitting here in front of us, Lexi Ray. I felt like one of the impediments that she had her sophomore and junior year is she would get that yardage, she would look at the pin, and then she would just start talking. She would try to actually talk herself out of the yardage and talk herself into hitting another shot that she really shouldn't hit. She had a great senior year, and I felt like she did a much better job of getting the yardage, hitting to the center of the green, sticking to the plan.
I told this story at Lexi's senior night too. When she was a freshman, I felt like she played with the most confidence. She would step up to a shot and just hit the shot with the most confidence that I had seen in a player. And then as a coach, it was so interesting to see that in what you had mentioned in her sophomore, junior year, where I just felt like that confidence over a shot had kind of gone down. And then that's when the doubt came in, the overthinking. On here too, we have doubting yourself, which she did both of those. And then her senior year, she bounced back and played with that confidence that she had her freshman year. And it was just really interesting to see as a coach how that played out and kind of these things we're talking about, how that made her a better golfer in by her senior year. So definitely, like you said, Ted, overthinking the shot, doubting yourself, letting that self doubt come in. Can I execute this shot? Is this the right yardage? Did I pick the right club? Am I going to be able to go over the water? All that doubt, instead of just committing to your yardage.
Yeah, the next thing is trying too hard. The thing that facilitates anybody trying too hard in golf is in the back of your mind is this number that keeps popping up, whether it's the number you're hoping to make on the hole you're playing, whether it's the number you want to shoot on the front nine, or whether it's the 18 hole total. And I think trying too hard can be a byproduct of focusing too much on the number rather than the next shot and just executing the next shot. And that is something that we have really spent a lot of time talking to our team about in the last couple of years is it's all about the next shot and then the next shot and then the next shot. And at some point the round is going to be over with. And yes, there's going to be a number involved when you add all these next shots up. But if you focus on the next shot, I think it will get your mindset away from trying too hard.
And we have an example of that, even a player on the boys team now. Trying too hard for him when I see it on the golf course usually comes with the tempo being really sped up. So what we're really working on for him is to be mindful during his pre-shot routine and his practice swing of instead of swinging on a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, we're trying to notch that down to like a 6 or a 7 at the very most. That's kind of the one thing he's thinking about it is tempo keeps him from trying too hard and forcing shots that he's not capable of. The next one that causes some problems when playing bad is getting frustrated. And that's usually when those expectations were set a little high. But think about a round of golf. You have a player that they're playing pretty good and then they hit a bad tee shot. Maybe they hit one out of play, have to take a drop. And then you see that frustration because they had such a good round going. And it's really hard for them to get it back.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it kind of falls into this thing of having too high of expectations. And a great example of this would be a really good player who has his heart set on going out and breaking par today. All right. And he gets a bad break or hits a bad shot on the first hole and he makes triple bogey. Well, now all of a sudden, his expectations are not looking so good. And you mentioned this last night with the meeting that we had with our players and parents on the problem with having too high of expectations is then it makes it really difficult to rechannel your thoughts, regroup, and understand that my expectations are now going to have to change because of something that's happened. And I would say this in the type of round that I just mentioned. Honestly, some of the most satisfying rounds of golf that I've had were rounds when maybe I started out with a couple of double bogeys and I wound up maybe I shot even par that day and I got it back, or I shot 74 after I made a triple on the first hole. Well, that's a highly successful round. That's a round you could really feel good about at the end of the day. But along those lines, when something bad does happen to you, you can't try to get it all back at one time. Again, it gets back to executing the next shot and the next shot and the next shot. And when you do that, then all of a sudden you start to string a birdie in here or there and you start picking those shots back up and you work your way back down where you want it. But again, a common thing that we see high school players do, they kind of panic when something bad happens. And even in the case of good players, because they're capable of making some good things happen, then they try to rush it and they try to just they get impatient and even more bad things, wind up happening.
I like the terms reframe and reset. So if you can talk to your players about their expectations before a round, maybe they say something like either a score focus or something that you don't think is going to be attainable. Maybe that red flag raises for you on something that an expectation that could cause some problems. I think it's important for us as coaches to reframe that expectation and say, instead of trying to hit every fairway today, maybe a better expectation would be that you're going to be able to do your pre-shot routine on every shot today. That's something you can control and kind of reframe their expectations. And then having some sort of reset during the round, like a word that you can share between your players is, all right, let's reset. I want to see your routine. We don't care where the ball goes, but I want to see you execute this shot, how we had been talking about, and try to get to them. Now, not saying a reset is going to instantly flip a switch and get them shooting how they want, but I think it'll at least help them get back on the right track during a golf round.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about our best golf happens when we do certain things. I feel like as I look through this list we're gonna go through, we can kind of pair some of these up, and I'll take the first two and say that not thinking a lot and, trusting my golf swing, to me, those two things kinda go hand in hand. Again, I get back to some of the best rounds that I've played in my lifetime. Those were certainly rounds that I wasn't thinking a lot about my golf swing. I trusted it. I had prepared prior to whatever those rounds were that I was out there playing from a competitive standpoint. And I'd prepared by practicing, by doing my range work prior to the round. And I felt really good when I stepped onto the first tee. And I knew I was ready.
I'd be so curious to see when our players do this, what they say when they say, I play my best golf when. And hopefully, a lot of them will say, I play my best golf when I prepare properly and I trust my swing. Obviously, positive self talk and trying to prevent yourself from getting frustrated after a bad shot. That's really hard for all ages to do. But I think how you talk to yourself during a round can help you feel positive or negative.
Oh, I totally agree. And we've worked with Dr. Bob Winters, a renowned sports psychologist, and Bob always uses the analogy with self-talk of be your own caddy. If I was caddying for you and you hit a shot and I said, Crystal, that shot is awful. Crystal, that is an absolutely stupid shot, you moron. And if that continued for a hole or two, how many holes would I be on your bag before you fired me?
Yeah, I'd kick you off pretty
Pretty
quick.
quick. So,
Yeah.
that being the case, then it gets back to self-talk. If those are the expectations that you have from a caddy, then have the same expectations for yourself.
Right. And another thing that Dr. Bob said that it just made me think about this because I've seen so much where it says it's you versus you, like you are playing yourself. But Dr. Bob actually reframed that. And he says it's not you versus you, it's actually you for you, meaning you are there to support yourself. You need to be your biggest encourager. You need to be that person. That can give yourself encouragement during a round. So you're not against yourself, you're actually for yourself. And I thought that was a really cool reframe.
Is, and I think another thing that kind of falls a little bit in line with that is exhibiting really good body language when you are playing your best golf. I mean, let's face it, when you're playing your best golf, your body language should be really good. When you're playing bad golf, your body language probably sucks. So, telling yourself no matter how you're playing to always exhibit good body language, I think is very important. And I do also believe that will kind of help your own psyche, and it will help you pull out of whatever little rut you might be in during a certain point in the round. And I think the other thing, anybody that's got bad body language out there, from my standpoint, you're really giving your opponent a tremendous advantage because they kind of know where your head's at, and that's probably going to help them play a little bit better. So the more even keel you can be certainly has to fall in line with what happens when you play your best golf.
I know we ask our players a lot, do you enjoy golf? Are you enjoying being out there? And so I know with a lot of our guys, they go out and play all the time with their buddies, they have fun. But sometimes when they get in competition, it doesn't look like they're having as much fun out there because they are putting too much pressure on themselves. So we try to remind them that, hey, this is a sport to be enjoyed. you're on the golf course, and don't forget how grateful we should be to be out here.
So, hopefully these are some things that as a coach you can pass on to players and parents both that'll help the performance of your team. The last thing that I'd kind of like to just mention, we're actually going to have an exercise here at practice tonight where we discovered that in our guidance department at Franklin Community High School, we have a lady who is skilled in mental wellness. Candace Carlin is her name, and we're actually going to come out and Candace is going to talk to our team tonight. Now, I view this as us having a tremendous opportunity to have a resident sports psychologist at the school. Didn't even really realize this resource was available until a couple of weeks ago. And we've asked all of our players, our top 8 players, to come in here with a question tonight. And one of the things that she specializes in is performance anxiety, pre-performance anxiety, dealing with being nervous before competition, being nervous during competition. So I'm curious to see how all that plays out. And the only reason I bring this up, if you're a coach, you might want to check with your guidance department and see if, in fact, they have a counselor on duty that can help your players and be accessible during the school day for some of these things that a sports psychologist who may come in and speak to your team can't do because they're not there on a daily basis.
There's a lot of pressure on kids these days, and they're balancing a lot schoolwork, social activities, sports. And let's just face it, their time management probably isn't that great. They can get overwhelmed, and I think it's great to have a resource on site where if they get overwhelmed, you can have somebody help them get back on track so that they can stay focused. Ted, we're going to spend the last few minutes. We had a question from a coach come in about how we handle behavioral issues. Let's say you've set your team values, you have your core values, you have your code of conduct, and you have a player that isn't living up to those team values, or maybe they break the code of conduct with their behavior. How do we handle that?
Well, we can kind of go down the list and give some specific examples of things that we've dealt with. Our teams, like every other team across America, from time to time, we have dealt with scoring integrity issues. And we emphasized the importance of that to our players before we ever go out and have our first qualifying round. But obviously, you talked about pressures comes from all different areas for high school kids, and a lot of times the first question they have to answer to when they walk in the door is, well, how'd you play tonight? What did you shoot? Where are you at in the qualifier? And sometimes that can really create, I don't even know what the right word is, some confusion in the brain of the player, and they feel like they're letting people down when they don't shoot the score they want. So they shave a few, and they wind up turning in a score that's not accurate. And so our first defense, we'll sit down and go over all this with the player. We'll throw that round out in terms of having it count for anything and understand. Now, we have caught players on our own. We've watched from a distance if we felt like we had a potential issue with the player. We've not been in real clear sight of the group they were playing in, and we've done a score check of our own when the round got over with. But we also rely on players that are in the group, to point these things out. And we've had players come to us after a round and say, hey, this happened, that happened. And so we try to talk through it, but we'll throw the score out. And then if it happens the second time, there'll be a suspension without question, probably a 10-day suspension, depending upon the circumstances, whether it was in competition or whether it was in practice. That's probably going to dictate the length of the suspension along those lines.
So I'm going to throw in rules integrity is going to be very similar that we've handled. If somebody didn't follow the rules properly, we'll have that discussion. And again, if it's a ongoing offense, then there will be a suspension on that. We've had some more minor issues. We had one player who would continually not mark his golf ball, and he ended up playing the wrong ball twice after we continually reminded him. And he was one of our best players.
He was our best player
At the
that year.
time, yeah, he was a good kid. So I don't know why he wasn't listening to us, but we handled that. How did we handle that?
Well, what we did was he played the wrong ball in an 18-hole tournament on Saturday. He came back and he played the wrong ball in a qualifier. And after that happened the second time, then we sat him out of our next competitive match and just said, basically, I don't know how many times we have to tell you this. You know better. And he was not doing it on purpose. I mean, these were accidents, but the first one was an accident. The second one was being careless, and so that led to the suspension that we gave him for that match, no doubt.
I would say most of the time, if you're just trying to make a point, you got a good player, make a mistake, we'll kind of shift the lineup. We've been known to move somebody who's playing in that 1 or 2 spot for our next tournament. Usually it's a 9-hole event that we can make these changes. We'll play him in the 5 spot. And it's an example to the team as well. So the team knows that there is going to be a consequence. We've kind of moved them down in the lineup. We've sat them out for a 9-hole or an 18-hole match. And usually that gets the point. Obviously, with discussion, too. We have talks with them.
Yeah, I mean, we've had situations where, we've had a player that we didn't feel like was really being the best teammate that they could be. They were more focused on they were worrying about other players and how it was going to affect their spot in the lineup rather than just going out there and taking care of their own business. We've dealt with, I would say, borderline bullying issues. And these would be players that we probably would elect not to travel with. I don't care where they're at in the lineup, and unless they can exhibit the correct behavior around their teammates and their coaches, really no reason to be around them for a while. So they would not be participating in competitive matches without a doubt.
In this coaches training through the NFHS, they actually have, and we printed it straight from that, the conditions for travel play. And it spells it out so clearly. Honestly, you can change stuff on that if you want, but it lays it out really nice and goes through all that. So if you just have a player that is causing some issues, that's going to be spelled out in the beginning of the season that says, if you are not showing good sportsmanship or if X, Y, and Z, then you will not be eligible to travel with the team. So make sure that you lay those out ahead of time so that you don't have to make those decisions like mid-season and create a lot of stress.
Hey, this is a voluntary operation for everybody, the players and the coaches as well. And we preach this to every team that we coach. Team chemistry is probably the number one priority that we have, good team chemistry. And I don't want to spend 2 hours late in the day with people that can't get along with each other. So unfortunately, if you find yourself as the player that's stirring the drink, so to speak, then you're probably going to be eliminated in some form or another. I would say that, the last thing that we should probably mention, and I would think that every school has an athletic code of conduct, and they've got the penalties well laid out for various offenses that might involve substance abuse. We have had that at it with a really good player. Good player that just he made a mistake, but it cost him 50% of his season, and it had a really tough impact on our team. So that's another point of emphasis that we make going forward. And we've been very lucky here at Franklin. I mean, we've coached 12 seasons going into this year, and we've only had it happen once. That's a pretty good record.
Right. So, coaches, we hope you have enjoyed episode 16 of the High School Golf Podcast. Please feel free to reach out, give us your feedback, send us your questions and topics that you want us to cover. My email is crystal, CRYSTAL, at thelegendsgolfclub.com.
And mine is Ted Bishop 38 PGA at AOL.com. I'm going to make one last pitch for coaches out there to go through this NFHS golf coaching certification in 3 areas that we did not talk about that they really cover in a great way are helping players to score on the golf course. There's a segment on there about on-course progression and how to practice on the golf course. And they give you a bunch of great games to lower the stress of your players. I just can't emphasize enough to everybody, this is a tremendous opportunity for you to learn and become a better coach.
Absolutely. We hope you enjoyed episode 16 of the High School Golf Podcast, and we look forward to next time.